Greener. That was my name, not my given name, not my favorite color. It was the name that the public school kids gave me. I was a Catholic school student and I wore a plaid green uniform. We just happened to be on the same bus together. I looked and was different in their eyes. I'm sure many of you can relate to a childhood memory where you were seen as different for one reason or another. I'm here to tell you tonight that we are far more than our childhood nickname. My name is Angie Corbo, and I'm a faculty member in Communication Studies at Widener University, and I'm delighted to be here with you tonight. When I reflect back on my greener days, I smile. I survived the bus ride, and I even made some friends along the way. The route to school was indirect, but I got to where I needed to be. I remember finding my people in that small grade school. 1 grade per class, 8 years together, and we shared many experiences. I felt like we all belonged to an extended family. We were a community. I share this story with you as a starting point. Communication and storytelling are powerful tools for learning about ourselves and others. We communicate through layered messaging. Communication includes verbal, nonverbal, visual, social media, written communication. Communication is intentional and unintentional at times. We share messages with others and hope that the listener's understanding matches our original intention. From our interactions with others, we know communication is a process. Communication is often imperfect. When it comes down to it, communication is so much more than words. It is important to take time for personal reflection. This helps us to be more intentional with our communication. Our intrapersonal communication is so valuable. This is where we process our internal thoughts, our reactions, and our responses. This information informs us about ourselves and the world around us. Our self-awareness builds social awareness. In other words, we remember the moments of our lives when we felt included, and we definitely remember those moments where we were excluded, bullied, harassed, or even othered. Our time together tonight is not a diversity training session. Rather, it is a call to action to examine ourselves, our behaviors, and our communication messages. I hope sharing a few moments from my journey can help others see how you can identify the small and even the mundane moments along the way in your lives, how they can all have a lasting impact. We hear so much about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. It's also known as DEIB or DEINB. It is natural to have a range of emotions when we think about our previous experiences with DEI and B. It's natural to maybe feel nervous or self-conscious or maybe even guilty. Those feelings are valid, and they're something that we own and something that we can learn from. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are so much more than buzzwords. DEI and B represent an engaged effort where people are seen and heard. DEI and B cannot be forced into an existing culture. DEI and B is a personal commitment to make our world a kinder, more empathic, and more interconnected place. Emotional management is the change agent that facilitates a commitment to building belonging and inclusion. Change will only occur through human interaction, human connection, emotional management, and an infrastructure that is willing and able to support the creative and compassionate building blocks for DEI and B. Embracing the moment rather than going at full speed allows us to fully appreciate the moments of belonging and inclusion, the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly. There is so much power from living in the moment. We have some of the most profound life moments in the most unexpected places, in the hallways, talking to somebody in the church parking lot, maybe even when you're walking your dog around your neighborhood. When we take personal responsibility, we realize that we are actors in our own lives, and that's really powerful. These moments also have the potential for us to connect to others who are looking for their place, their space, and their voice. So I'm going to take you beyond the greener days. So now we're at the high school edition. Sports were big in my family, and I was a distance runner. Naturally, the cross-country team was a great fit for me. So as many of you in here know, whether you're an athlete, a former athlete, or a parent of an athlete, you have that preseason physical that you need to go through. So in my case, a parent volunteered his medical practice to complete the sports physical. It was very generous of him. So now picture this. I go in there, my mom took me to the appointment, and I walk into the waiting room with the gigantic, ginormous, huge football team, a couple of other athletes, and 9th grade me. Oh, and a bunch of pregnant women who were in the waiting room. The team doctor was the obstetrician who delivered my youngest brother, Dr. Johnson. So I arrived at the first day of practice. I showed up to the gym, I said hello to Coach Luckman, and he said, "We're over there." And I said, "Coach, that's the boys' locker room." He said, "Yeah, go on in, we'll start in a minute." I was so scared. I was like, I can't go into the boys' locker room. I still have no idea how I made my way into that locker room on that very first day, but I'm so glad that I did. The encounter was completely intimidating, to say the least. But there is something magical about this eclectic and diverse group of individuals. So what did I learn from this? Feeling vulnerable can open up many new opportunities. And I also learned the power of perseverance and grit. I so wanted to run out of that waiting room when I walked in and saw all the other athletes who were there ready to compete for the fall. And I also really wanted to run when Coach told me to go into the boys' locker room, but something told me to stay, and I'm so glad I did. That diverse group of athletes in that locker room went on to win a state championship. While the victory was really that doing of only a few varsity athletes, the entire team got to celebrate the state championship. We all walked around with our state championship jackets, I was so proud to wear mine. Looking back, this group built a high sense of DEIB among teammates. We didn't call it that at the time, but we knew it and we felt it. Our human connection with others can nourish, support, encourage, and celebrate us. We also know that relationships can sometimes be complicated. We experience isolation, hurt, anxiety, and other powerful emotions. Learning about relationships is so important. Our first group, the family, gives us a preview on how to do life. We get to see how the group interacts with others in our neighborhoods. We get to understand family dynamics. This is where the equity piece comes in. We know that not every family and not every community has the same access to resources. Our families may not be perfect, but they really do the best that they can. I'm grateful that my parents sacrificed so that my brothers and I could have access to quality education, to sports, to piano lessons, and time with extended family. My grandmothers had a profound influence on me. So let me introduce you to Grandma Terry. Grandma Terry used her voice when women did not have many positions of power. I loved going over to her house, and I loved listening to her on the phone. She and my grandfather, Hal Conrad, were advisory board leaders for a Native American museum that was in our local community. This community helped that history continue in such a positive way. Now, let me introduce you to Grandma Josie. She was the kindest soul I've ever met. She baked every type of cookie imaginable, crocheted hundreds, if not thousands of blankets, and made everything seem effortless. When you were in her presence, you knew you were loved and you knew that you belonged. Now I'm going to take you to the other side of the family, and I'll talk about visits with the old school Italian relatives. You know, those visits where women were in the background, men did all of the talking, but really, you knew that women were really running everything behind the scenes. When my family and I would go to visit our aunt and uncles, I pretty much knew the drill. They would ask about my brother's academic and athletic success, and this was certainly warranted. Both of my brothers are incredibly bright, they were great athletes, and they're tremendously accomplished individuals. I knew that it just was what it was. And that moment, I knew it wasn't about me. I knew that their questioning was more about a tradition and interacting with my male siblings. It was a pattern that was socially reproduced by culture and values and traditions. I'll never forget the time where the Christmas card came to the house and I saw my brothers open it, and it said, "Dear Nick and Matt, love Aunt and Uncle." Inside of the card, there was maybe $5 or $10 for each of my brothers. No "Dear Angie," no "Say hi to your sister." It just was the moment how it was. And that actually helped me. It helped me understand that I was not imagining the dynamic that occurred. It just was the norm for the time. I was actually really okay with it. It gave me the time to reflect and notice that there's so much power in our lived experiences. Moments like this, small or large, can shape how we see others and the world around us. My parents and my grandparents did not subscribe to that old school thinking of my other relatives, but I'm pretty sure my brothers still find that Christmas card story very amusing. Now I'm going to talk to you about a time where I actually had an unintended barrier to DEIB. So let me introduce you to my graduate school friend, Dr. Marcine Pickron-Davis. Marcine and I took many classes together, and we also had the opportunity to work together professionally. One day we attended a diversity workshop facilitated by another graduate school colleague and a professional colleague, Jose Rodriguez. Jose asked us to list our social identities. Well, female was the first on my paper. Clearly, you've all heard my family past, so female was the first thing on the paper. It was the late 1990s, and I was newly married, so I wrote wife. And then I started to think about my other social identities. I was a daughter, a sister, I was a friend, I was a professional, I was a graduate student. But then I started to wonder, how am I going to represent all of these identities during this exercise? I didn't want to rank and list, so I was thinking about creating a circle. And as I was in my head developing all of this, Marcine leaned over and said, "Why didn't you write white female?" And then it hit me. I did not include my race in my social identity. I think that was the first time I really understood the power of my racial identity and what it meant to others, as well as what it meant to me. When I retell that story, I get the same heaviness to my chest. I think about what learning occurred, and I'm so grateful for the kindness of a friend who helped me on in that journey. That internalized learning that occurred for me was far more impactful than reading an article or listening to a lecture. This helped me to embrace my social identity. I knew I had a lot of work to do, and I continue on that journey today. Self-awareness is a powerful way to make incremental yet meaningful change in our relationships and in our communities. We need to slow down so we can live to embrace the moment. We need to understand that uncomfortable moments often produce a fight-flight type of response. When we want to forget something because we're embarrassed or other emotions occurred, that's clearly flight. When we're angry or have other powerful emotions, that could indicate fight. I'll suggest that there's another type of fight response. For many of us who suffer from anxiety, we'll go through that obsessing process. What did I say that was wrong? How could I have done that differently? And I think that's a common pattern that people may experience. And what I would say is when these fight-flight responses occur, we need to take that as a sign that we need to move forward. Not forget and move forward, but embrace and move forward. Creative and constructive ways can help us create healing pathways for our future. Inclusion asks, who's standing outside of our circle? We need to make a personal commitment to DEI and B, and we should follow the everything I ever needed to know I learned in kindergarten philosophy. Don't eat the glue, there are never too many sparkles, and be kind to others. We need to ask ourselves, what role do we play in exclusion? We may unintentionally exclude others because we might be moving so quickly through life that we just want to get things done, and we may not notice who or what is around us. We may be comfortable, and so we'll resist change as a result. Or we may be uncomfortable including people that we perceive to be different through their behaviors, through their life choices, or maybe their beliefs. Self-reflection requires honesty and a willingness to recognize the not-so-pleasant side of our human nature. We need to listen with courage and compassion rather than criticism. The path forward may be nonlinear, but with commitment, we'll move forward. This can also take us to unexpected places and spaces in our lives. We know that this is difficult, intricate, and uncomfortable work at times, but it is such important work to do. In conclusion, self-awareness helps us monitor ourselves and gain a better understanding of the world around us. Your communication, intentional and unintentional, verbal, nonverbal, interpersonal, intrapersonal, all plays a pivotal role in our relationship with others. DEI and B is not a transaction. It is not something to check off our to-do list. Change is made from the small interactions in our daily lives where we can begin to facilitate diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Thank you very much.